an important question that the commander community just isn't asking at the casual level. And no, it's not who the optimal group hug commander is, which I have thoughts on. It's actually if the bracket system is working the way it's intended for the commander player base. Now, we recently had additions to the game changers list, 18 more cards added, but we also had a slight update to the intentionality of the bracket system as well. Not hard and fast changes, just more clarity. And that's what I wanted to go over with this video by the distraction makers. They're talking about whether or not the bracket system is working as intended, and I believe its vagueness actually does help it get there. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know how your experience has been at the LGS with your local group, wherever you play. Have they taken up the bracket system the quote-unquote way it was intended? How many people are against it? How many people are just confused? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Are the commander brackets working? I'm literally getting this video fresh, and I'm like, honestly, I was setting up a video to already go over this based on a game I had just yesterday actually, but I'm like, all right, let's leave a like on the video. All right, take me away.
Thought we would check in on the bracket system, considering they just made some pretty big updates to it. So this one's going to be about the update to the game changers, and then also just sort of like where we feel like the bracket system is at. So let's start.
So to be clear, they haven't really changed the bracket system. They changed the game changers list. And the other day I made a TikTok about how the changes shifted commander at all levels. And a lot of people called me disingenuous for that, which I think is incorrect, because all of the commander brackets are about intent. And Gavin outlined that very clearly in his article. A lot of the cards that were added to game changers, and I'm not talking about the unbanned cards. The 5 unbanned cards are immediately on the game changers list, but there were 18 other cards added to the list of game changers. Technically speaking, those cards could be played in bracket 1. They could be. Some of them would be absolutely insane to do so, but some of them can based on intent. Now in bracket 2, there are even situations where some commander decks, I believe it's like 2 or 3, that come straight out of the box technically at bracket 3 because they include a game changer now that's now added to the list. And so with these cards, you have to understand that intent is an important thing to highlight because it does change everything. It does make it so when game changers get added, their intent can no longer ever be good enough to be played in bracket 1. Obviously, with rule 0 discussions and all that can happen, but if you're following the guidelines, that can't work. So whenever a change is made like that, whenever something is added to the game changers list, it does change all brackets in commander, but the bracket rulings themselves haven't changed, which I think is good. There is a concrete foundation to build your knowledge of the game, your deck building, as well as your play patterns around. And that hasn't changed.
With the things that got taken off of the game changers list.
Yes.
Not that many, but there was a couple.
So the first card is Trouble in Pairs, 2 and a white enchantment. If an opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. Whenever an opponent attacks you with 2 or more creatures, draws their second card each turn, or casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. And the second card is Trinisphere. It's 3 mana. It's an artifact. As long as Trinisphere is untapped, each spell that would cost less than 3 mana to cast costs 3 mana to cast instead.
In one of our previous videos, we talked about all the different game changers and what we thought about them being on the list. Trinisphere was one that we brought up as like, this doesn't really make a lot of sense because in a
also shout out to Gavin, love your glasses. And I say that because I have similar ones, you know, it's like the under color is a little different, but shout out to Gavin for the great glasses.
Casual environment. It doesn't like making everything cost 3. Isn't that really big of a deal?
I think we were iffy on Trouble in Pairs too, because Trouble in Pairs is kind of, I think we joked about how they wanted to get rid of extra turns, but Trouble in Pairs was a card that negated extra turns. So
well, and that falls in line too with our thoughts on
Hot Agreed shirt on
sort of like answers being on the game changers list is a little weird because you're using up one of your game changer slots to do something that should protect you from other game changers. That always feels a little weird.
Say like, and you know what, Rachel Weeks kind of brought this up in one of the recent episodes of the Command Zone podcast, where I like how like they actually softly address the idea of banned as a commander by adding it as a game changer, because people don't want to use up their slot unless they're really intent on that commander, which is fair. Something like Turgid, the commander itself is so powerful that just having access to that in the command zone makes up for not having an extra 2-3 game changers, honestly, at that point. And so I like how it adds that level of banned as a commander kind of. That's something that a lot of people don't think about.
Right.
Which they actually did a little nod to when they talked specifically about Force of Will.
Right, which was interesting.
That they were talking about potentially removing it from the Game Changer list, which I think would be a great idea.
But yeah, I don't know if I can confidently say like all the major counter spells in that way, but
Force of Will specifically.
Force of Will, I think I could see that going off the list.
Yeah. Anyway, jumping ahead. So as far as these coming off the list, seems fine.
Seems fine. Cards that have been added to the Game Changers list.
Right. So
there's a lot.
This is a pretty long list. I think there's like 18 of them or something. So let's go through and just read them off real quick, and then we'll probably just select a few to talk about, and then we can get to our bracket system thoughts. Generally.
Yeah, I'll just read the list out. Teferi's Protection, Humility, Narset, Parter of Veils, Intuition, Consecrated Sphinx, Necropotence, Orcish Bowmasters, Notion Thief, Deflecting Swat, Gamble, Worldly Tutor, Crop Rotation, Seedborn Muse, Natural Order, Food Chain, Aura Shards, Field of the Dead, and Mishra's Workshop.
So
all of these I agree with, except for maybe, no, honestly, all of them I agree with. The weird ones are like Deflecting Swat's a weird one. I'm not gonna lie, because it's very specific in how it works. I think Josh Lee Kwai actually like talked about it really well. He wasn't very happy with it, but I think I understood his points on it. Deflecting Swat's a weird one. Aura Shards is like a classic one. I'm surprised. It's a very powerful card, and once it got reasoned out to me, I can see it. I was talking to someone about Aura Shards the other day, just because I was even talking to a friend group, like a friend of mine, because there's only one person in that pod that my friend group that plays Aura Shards. He's like the green-white player. He's the token player. And so, of course, it's great for him. It locks down a large part of the table, but we've grown to like in our local metagame to be able to just answer stuff like that. So I've never like thought of it as a problem, but in a wide open place where you're not going up against the same decks over and over again, then obviously
some of this is like shoring up some of what I think is logical consistency with the Game Changers list. Like we're bringing in the rest of the sort of tutors that cost 1 mana. Let's get those on the list, because then at least we're consistent that all the tutors that cost 1 mana are on the list.
I think that was a big complaint that players had, was why isn't Worldly Tutor on there? Why isn't Gamble on there? You know?
when the other ones were.
Right.
Also, to put a few more green cards on the Game Changers list, there seemed to be a little bit of a bias there in terms of what the green was lacking.
Yeah.
And then also just some other like particularly powerful cards that just are kind of a no duh to put on the list, like Necropotence. Humility is just like a miserable card to play against.
I definitely was surprised to not see Teferi's Protection on there initially.
Yeah. Well,
such a powerful.
Okay, so I think Teferi's Protection being on the list is fine.
Notably, the other day, I actually did not know this, but I believe Nitpicking Nerds did a short on this, where you can actually beat someone with Infect by proliferating the Infect counter underneath Teferi's, or like over Teferi's Protection. Someone could Teferi's Protection to give themselves whatever, just get them out of the game. But if they have Infect counters, if they have 9 and you proliferate them to 10, that actually works under Teferi's Protection and they lose the game. As far as the Nitpicking Nerds short went. But I didn't check the comments. I'm assuming they're right. So maybe that's me making an assumption, but it was pretty cool. So just something to note underneath Teferi's Protection.
It does fall a little bit into that category of like an answer,
right?
But it's probably more powerful than something like Force of Will or whatever would be, right? Force of Will,
I think it's
one thing,
technically one of the strongest answers you could have.
Yeah, and it's particularly obnoxious when somebody just bloop, blinks out,
right?
And what you tried to do to them it doesn't happen. So
yeah, let's talk about a little bit of the philosophy of like why we think that some of these decisions were made, because they gave I think they were really great and thorough with giving a lot of reasons as to why some of these things were added, but there's definitely a certain pattern that we were kind of noticing about these cards that seemed a little strange as far as the decision making goes to add this to the Game Changers list. One in particular is Narset, Parter of Veils.
Someone on my last video commented why I have Narset in all my blue decks. I have, like, looking back at my thing right now, to be fair, I think I have technically four blue decks. I would not consider Obeka, or actually, yeah, I would not consider Obeka my traditional blue deck. I built that as really, it's Obeka Initiative. And I think like y'all can actually see my decks right there. That's my pile of 10 decks right there. For those of you that have never noticed, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 2 rows of 5. Those are my decks. And so I do have Narset not in my mill deck, because there actually are a fair amount of creatures in that deck that I do want to find. So I don't want to bottom them with Narset. I do want to find them. But the other two decks definitely have Narset. I feel like Narset's ability is too free, especially in my like Go Infinite Izzet deck. Narset is just too free. It stops so many extra value spells. And Narset's like, I used to have it in my group hug deck just as like a final choke piece, like once people were doing a little too much. But then I realized one of my primary win conditions really like was the enchantment. It was blue and 4 that makes it so whenever your opponents cast a spell, they draw 7 cards, and Narset would just like completely stop that. Like I actually ran into a game where I would Narset and grab that, and then I'm like, wait, this doesn't work, does it? Because the primary point of that deck is group hug until the point where I can win through some type of like Thassa's Oracle win. I've had to kind of adapt that with the game changers list and everything, and I've had it built for about a year and a half. Again, group hug to the point where you can self mill and win. So sometimes I wouldn't really win through some type of like choke group hold win, but I've had to now edit it where Narset's not in the deck. So not all my blue decks have.
So Narset part of Reveals, they actually grouped it with Orcish Bowmasters and Notion Thief. Narset says each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. Basically, Orcish Bowmasters and Notion Thief have like similar sort of punishments to draw, or Notion Thief completely stops people from being able to draw.
So on the most extreme end, these cards are particularly powerful with spells that are called Wheels, which are named after the card Wheel of Fortune. You're discarding your hand and then you're drawing back a bunch of cards. And these cards will lock out other players from being able to draw their cards back. Yeah. So that is a problematic play pattern with these cards. So putting them on the game changers list sort of acknowledges that idea. But the problem that we're sort of talking about in the philosophy side of this is that these are cards that allow you to punish the dominant strategy of the format, which is what we call making butter. And in Commander context, we define sort of these things as butter being economy, meaning drawing cards, playing extra lands, things like that. And in Commander, one-to-one removal is particularly bad in that you're spending a card to take another one of your opponents down a card, but your other 2 opponents weren't affected at all, which means that you're effectively advantaging them by doing this.
Right. The reason
this happened literally yesterday. I was on stream with Rip Pull Repeat, Phages Bay, and what is it? Literally the host of the stream. I don't know why I'm forgetting the name of the host of the stream right now. Magic Highness. There you go. And so I was on that stream, and there was this great play I made where Rip was the one grabbing a board wipe every time. Rip will be like landed 3 board wipes. And to be fair, shout out to Magic Highness and her AC deck. If Rip did not board wipe at every single point in that game, because the other 2 of us could not find our answers, that game was just running away from us. So Rip had an answer at every point in that game. But also they were now technically disadvantaged by all of that, because Magic Kindness was being kind of nice about things, wasn't really swinging out, and was just building out their own board. Inkvale was just like, Inkvale was the one and like instigating the Rip hate, and I was just like along for the ride because Rip countered one of my spells. I'm like, all right, I'm done. You and me are enemies for this game. So I ended up like throwing a bunch of stuff his way as well. So he board wiped and affected the whole board. But I ended up spending 10 mana. I cast a Kozilek Butcher of Truth. My personal friend Prod has a mill player. I got to play a Shuffle Titan in there. So I played the Kozilek Butcher of Truth. I had 10 mana and I played it with an Arena of Glory. So not only do I get to draw 4, great. I bring it down, Annihilator for 12/12, swing it at Rip. And this is one of those situations where you even understand like, you immediately paint yourself as the target, but you annihilated 4 against a board that honestly he had a fair amount of tokens as well. And it really limited some of the things that I had for the other players. Because now Rip obviously had a target for me. I wiped out a bunch of his board, and he just ended up sacking a bunch of his lands, and he swung at me with like a token that had 2 swords equipped with it. So it's like I didn't really gain anything by that. So sometimes you have to be careful with like how you're affecting one player. And obviously we were having a fun game. It was a bracket 3 game and everything, right? And so when you're doing something like that, when you're giving that player like a 3/3 beast token with something like Beast Within, you have to like do it with the understanding of like how that token might come back at you, or are you able to block that? Like, do you have the monarchy, but you're giving someone a beast token that they can swing back at you and grab the monarchy with? So you have to think about like how this affects so much of the board. And sometimes it's okay to make that decision and take the L and like take the ire away from you, because ultimately in that situation with something like the Monarchy, it's away from you. Players are going to attack like someone else for that, and that's fine. But if you need the Monarchy to bring you back, maybe you're missing a land drop, maybe you're just trying to draw through and find one of your critical mass spells. Like in my Obeka initiative deck, I was just trying to find more cards with the initiative, and so losing a card draw isn't that ideal, but I went for the fun play of paying 10 mana and playing a hasty Kozilek. So sometimes it's good to answer things, sometimes it's good to just let things go.
That butter is so much stronger is because normally in traditional sort of a war game that you might play is that the more that you are conquering another land, you are actually taking their resources. But in Commander, that's not the case. The more that you are single targeting another opponent, you aren't gaining anything from doing that. So what ends up actually happening is the greatest strategy is to not engage directly with any one person and instead build up as many resources as possible to take all three out at the same time, which is what you see at the highest level of play.
Right. And without these sort of mechanisms for curbing some of that, these ideas of punishing people for drawing lots and lots of cards or playing lots of land or whatever, which is sort of like a taboo in casual Commander, is affecting people's cards or affecting people's lands, especially. It's even explicitly stated in the bracket system that mass land destruction is not something you should be doing.
What's mass?
Right. Good question.
Two lands?
Maybe.
Here's my take on mass land destruction. Okay, single target. I think every deck, even bracket 4, CDH is a whole different discussion. Up to bracket 4, all decks, even the bracket 1 decks. Bracket 2 you can't do much about because that's just like pre-con straight out of the box. That's like its own category. Should have single target land removal. I said it. Single target land removal. Lands are too powerful in this game. There's too many lands that people get away with that just have like this random incremental value. Like even like a freaking Gaia Reach Sanitarium. There's a reason you're playing Gaia Reach Sanitarium. And you know what? These are the type of lands that are giving these players too much value and people aren't evaluating them correctly. And so they don't realize that the random 2 to 3 cards drawn, random 2 to 3 creatures made, random 2 to 3 cards milled, that the land is giving is what's giving that person the edge. They don't know that because they weren't there with those hands. They may not have paid attention to the graveyard. They may not have paid attention completely to every creature on the board, but that is the reason why they're winning the game. So having that single target removal for that land that's generating that value is going to be so important, especially something like Castle Lochthwain, a card that just runs away with the game. The one that Castle Ardenvale, it honestly generates a lot of value as well. Have single target land removal. Now, mass land destruction, that's a rule 0 conversation or a bracket 4 thing, obviously. You can play, but I believe, like, okay, again, it says in the rules that you can't, but in my belief, should be able to play mass land destruction with a rule 0 discussion as to why you're doing so. If you can't, you can't, right? If the table doesn't want it, they don't want it. You're not playing that bracket. If you're playing bracket 4, Armageddon to your heart's desire. Obviously, if you're Armageddon without a win condition, I don't know what the hell you're doing, right? Maybe you have a bunch of mana rocks out, you Armageddon, and then you're the one with like a ton of mana out. That's good. That's good, right? That you put yourself ahead. That's a play pattern that makes sense, I should say. But I think single target land removal should be in all decks.
Maybe 3, I don't know.
Oh.
So that's a problem. But it's interesting because there's sort of this unintended consequence of, okay, yeah, this makes players feel bad or whatever and potentially shuts them out of the game. But the flip side is if you're not affecting any of these things from those players, the game becomes about, well, who can just build up resources faster than everybody else, almost in a solitary way, and then eventually just play something that wins the game.
Right. And I think the reason I think this does somewhat of a disservice to, I think, the growth of players actually, not that they have to consider that, I suppose, but I think they should, is that I think a lot of players don't quite understand, or at an early stage, that the reason someone got ahead is because of their card draw, right? Yep. The reason is because you did not pay the 1 every time that there is a Rhystic Study trigger.
Right, but even then, just to get into Rhystic Study real quick, it's not just about paying the 1.
You have a whole video on it.
I've got a whole video about this. It's even if you pay the 1, you're still falling further behind.
Sure.
So whatever.
Being able to recognize that the more card draw someone has, that's a lot of value that they're gaining that you are not gaining. And so being able to basically have something that says, I don't have to pay the 1 and get behind it anymore, and I end up having this sort of this Narset or Orcish Bowmasters or Notion Thief or whatever to sort of negate that incline until someone else has to single target, and get themselves in a way sort of further behind in order to remove the thing that's preventing them from getting ahead, I think is actually good, and I think is creating good, interesting interactions.
And these cards, on the other hand, give you a way to move yourself further up in the game while also curbing other players. So you have to think about the amount of advantage that these cards give you while also stopping the advantage.
So again, like the Orcish Bowmaster is dealing 1 damage and creating a body, the Narset being able to tutor for something, tutor, search, dig, whatever. And then the Notion Thief instead drawing you the card
of your opponents, or at least curbing it.
Now, that being said, I can see the
Which is why in that case, I've always wondered, like, what shouldn't, like, I feel like we have Narset on the Game Changers list, Notion Thief, Orcish Bowmasters. Hot take, shouldn't we unban the blue card that makes it so whenever your opponent draws an extra card, instead you create a treasure token? Wasn't that like a creature? That was like a creature. It's banned in Commander. Shouldn't we unban that as a game changer? Maybe the EDH players would get a little too mad at that one.
Justification for if casual tables don't want to worry about that type of thing, they just want to play a lot of creatures and swing with creatures, that's fine. And if these just end up being a bracket 3 through 4 and 5 sort of a thing,
well, they're on the game changers list. So
yeah, so then that's, I think that's fine. I think that's understandable. But I think where maybe I get hung up on it is like, why then is this seeming to be like a negative, right? Of preventing other people from sort of building up butter as opposed to removing things, right? And so you end up seeing a card like Aura Shards, right? And Aura Shards seems to be that like quintessential, well, you can remove artifacts and enchantments.
It makes a lot of guns, and it's a gun. It's an engine, right? That similar to like Braids or something, right? Where it's a continual interaction mechanism where you're looking at something like Rhystic Study, which is a continual butter engine, and they're like, that's fine, but continual guns interaction, not okay.
And I think that really it's that we need stronger gun engines, basically, in order to counteract all of these current butter engines that we've got going on.
Choo choo.
Right.
Right. So again, this is the weirdness of putting answers on the Game Changers list, is that if you have you're having the engines on the list, which is Rhystic Study and Consecrated Sphinx are probably the best,
and Necropotence. No.
Yeah, Necropotence are really, particularly good.
Oh wait, Necropotence gets around this. Never mind. Put that.
Yeah, because you don't draw. Yeah. So you're putting these engines on the list, and then you're also putting the things to counter the engines on the list, which means that, again, it's the same problem with like Force of Will, right? Where you as a player are now devoting slots in your game changer slots at bracket 3 to answers rather than things that just make butter. So what that effectively means is that these cards are not going to get played because you would much rather be playing the engines than playing the things that stop the engines.
Which I think ultimately actually is a good thing. I think one of the best things the Game Changers list has done, honestly the bracket system as well, has improved deck building, and it will only get better from here. There are so many cards that people have been cruxed on, that so many people are used to just auto-including. They forgot what it means to really deck build. Everyone is a CDH deck builder without the purpose, right? Without the actual guideline and the end goal. Everyone wants to be a CDH deck builder. Everyone wants to optimize, play the best cards, but they don't actually know what that means, right? Because why are you optimizing, quote unquote, and playing the best cards, and you're not playing CDH? Because there are objectively good cards, and there are cards that actually work really well specifically with your commander. And those are the cards that you want. Because in a vacuum, in an LGS where you're going out into a wide open world, you want to make sure that you synergize with yourself. You have cards that draw you 3 cards if you're playing a bunch of humans. You have cards that draw you cards if you're playing fungi. You have cards that draw you cards. You don't need to just be playing Brainstorm in your blue decks, right? Brainstorm is a great example. It's a card that draws 3 cards. If you don't have too many shuffle effects, why are you playing that? Because Brainstorm is all about selection as well, because you're putting 2 cards away. You draw 3 cards, you look at your hand of now maybe 5 or 6, you put your 2 worst ones away, and ideally you shuffle them away with a fetch land or a Lorien Revealed Cycle or something like that. You put those away and you draw something new after that. And so why play that when you would rather play cards that reward you for what you're doing? So then you build more around that, right? You have cards that I'm making something up. This may or may not exist, but a card that draws you 4 cards for the cost of 5, but it costs 1 less for each fungi you have on the battlefield. And so you want to then create more fungi tokens, more plant tokens, whatever it might be. And then you, by doing that, want to play more more anthem effects cards that, maybe something like Kamal, the 7 mana Kamal that makes it so at the beginning of your combat, creatures you control gain like trample, +3/+3, all that stuff. And then you can pay 2, make like a land or whatever. Like play these anthem effects, and then like your deck really starts to come together. It really starts to come together when instead you made your deck technically worse because you didn't build off of that one engine card. You just put a brainstorm in there. You just put a ponder in there. You just put like a whatever generically good card in there. And now you don't want to use up those slots because you're limited by having game changers. Now you could play a bunch of bracket 4 games, but if you're in bracket 3, I feel like the vast majority of deck building in bracket 3, in my mind, is improving and will so more over time with the introduction of game changes, forcing people to just choose different options.
So I don't really understand putting these on the list, to be honest. I'm sure some people are going to disagree with that idea, but like, whatever. They played against Narset and it was miserable. Okay, sure. But like,
also, I guess Narset's especially silly to me because like just attacker. Like it's not even if you don't play removal, that's understandable. You don't play removal. We just talked about how actually playing single target removal is bad. You'll probably have creatures, and you can swing them at Narset.
Right. That one's weird. I don't know. It feels like, again, we're policing answers instead of problems, but whatever.
All right, so now that we've had time, we're not going to get into every single card. We got a lot of thoughts on them, but I think that's our primary point that we wanted to make. But so now that a little bit of time has sort of gone by since the brackets have been established, how do we feel overall about the bracket system?
Well, it was nice to get a little bit more insight into how Wizards is seeing the brackets and how they think the brackets are going.
Right. Yes. You want to? Yeah, we could get into that.
There was a little bit of data given in terms of the sort of uptake of this system within the community.
I actually have it. If you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So some of the data that Wizards actually provided on how the players have been responding to the bracket system is in the official survey done for MagicCon Chicago. 87% of people who tried the bracket system said it was helpful in their games. I actually think that that's really strong, but again, it's.
I think, and they'll probably acknowledge it in a second, just remembering that 87% of folks at MagicCon Chicago, remembering the folks that are going to a MagicCon that are participating in the bracket system or in Commander games are probably on average more enfranchised, and the uptick rate is going to be higher. I'm actually surprised it's not in the 90s. I actually think this is really low. I actually think, considering the amount of enfranchised players that go to a MagicCon that play Commander are more involved in the game, to go to a separate location to play a game of Commander. You are probably going there for events. You are going there to meet with friends that you haven't seen in a while, meet content creators. Like, you are more enfranchised in the game. I'm surprised this number isn't in the mid 90s, mid-low 90s. The fact that it's 87% is actually kind of low to me. The next number, folks running Spellbot, 54% of games on servers using Commander brackets to pair people. I actually think this number is really low. Surprisingly, I'm not saying the number's wrong. I'm surprised it's low because I feel like if you're playing Commander on Discord, all the negative memes and the culture around Discord, the fact that Discord, by the way, is now public, and we're about to see the death of Discord as we know it, because now it has to make moves to, be there for shareholders. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Discord has gone public. So now it has to make decisions for public funding, aka money-making decisions that have to work towards shareholders. And so if you're not making a decision, so we probably have certain features that are now going to be locked behind premium and all that stuff. So Discord will probably be going through a lot of changes. But if you're playing Commander on Spell Table through Discord, you are probably on average more enfranchised as well. So I'm really surprised this number is only 54%. The amount of enfranchised players, I feel like on average will be okay with this. They are more into posting their decks online. They're actively talking and playing. I feel like these people, I thought, would actually uptake this more. I'm surprised.
Kind of a biased community.
Go ahead. So, I'll talk about the potential.
There's a lot of criticisms with some data collection here, but and then it said MTGO, or Magic Online team over at Daybreak Games, said about half of all Commander games on Magic Online are using the bracket system.
This one I was kind of confused with, because they said they'll also let Gavin know that they're working on implementing the system programmatically. So built in. So how did you track brackets without it being built in? Like, was it just in the description? I've never played Commander on Moto. I think it's like really dumb. I there's too much going on. I can understand. I shouldn't call those people who play Commander online dumb. I think the system is dumb. If you play it and you enjoy it, fair enough. That's fine. I'm happy you're playing Commander, honestly. I'm just happy you're playing that. I just think it's a little too crowded for my little monitor here. I think it's a little too crowded. Regardless, when it comes to something like that, how are they tracking that? Just like they said, there's some criticism around data tracking. How are they getting this data? I don't know.
And then they said it's unofficial, but they also talked with Amy, who runs Spellbot. I don't know, is Spellbot
it was something that helps matchmake across
I've seen
Discord.
this on the server. I've never actually
Commander games.
It pairs Commander games across many major Discord servers. About 54% of all games on those servers use Commander brackets to pair people.
Okay, so these are numbers. We don't know exactly when they got these numbers, but I'm more curious to see like what the trend over time is. Like, does this continue to uptick or does it trend down? The other issue with the Commander Con survey, MagicCon survey that they did. Okay, so this was not done in like a double blind way, right? You're literally asking somebody, was this helpful? And they know that they're giving that feedback directly to the person that is working, like that the people working on it are going to see. You're asking exactly the audience that would be like, yeah, it was helpful. There's also going to be extreme bias in terms of this is a system that just was introduced, and players are going to have recency bias in that way, where they're going to start attributing a game that went well to the bracket system, which doesn't mean it was the bracket system that did that. They could have played those games anyway without the bracket system, and they could have been great games, but then now they're attributing that to the bracket system because it's there.
I was going to say,
for those of you who don't understand how to interpret data, this is a good criticism of data. As someone who's done a life science degree and worked alongside research, not directly, but have worked with methodology of research and use at some level in their job as well. This is a good way to criticize data. You should criticize statistics, and with the death of like online journalism and like the Dexteritos of the world being like #1 primary sources and people just swiping through their information in 10-second bits, it is at an all-time importance to be able to criticize data like this. Even for myself, if you find some data I'm giving is incorrect, please let me know. Please let me know. I would be happy to be incorrect and then be provided with the correct information so I know, but then also to be able to provide that to other people.
I think we've seen this a lot with game testing. You can ask people these questions. It's obviously good to get some data from what people are saying. However, I think what's more important is actually seeing how people are responding. Like, are the conversations that they're having actually beneficial? Is it actually creating more of these consistent outcomes of games that they want to see, as opposed to players saying these outcomes?
And that's a lot harder of a thing to do, right? You can't just say, well, did you like it? Did it help your games? They can just be like, yeah, I think so.
Because it's all subjective, right? It's hard to put a marker on a conversation because everyone is just going to interpret something differently, right? Like someone is going to interpret you shuffling in your chair as like you're uncomfortable or you're bored, and like when actually you just need a pee, right? You're actually enjoying yourself and you just need a pee or something, right? Like you're not actually having a bad moment. And so it's really hard to put set markers on even a conversation that someone is having to see if that conversation went well. It's hard to take subjective things and make them objective, which is why data collection can only go so far. It's limited. The human experience really does have its bounds.
So like, okay.
Right. And we technically we don't know how they collected this data. They could have done that.
That one I was just a little suspect of, but whatever, we'll move on. I'm seeing the brackets as being designed more as a tool, right? And we can start to get a little bit into some sort of, I guess, Christopher Alexander philosophy, where a design, the best design is one that satisfies the forces that are put upon it. So something like a tea kettle, right? It needs to be able to hold water. It needs to be able to get hot. It needs to be able to be handled like a tea kettle, right? It needs to design as philosophy, where a design, the best design is one that satisfies the forces that are put upon it. So
the best design is the one that satisfies the forces that are put upon it.
So something like a tea kettle, right? It needs to be able to hold water. It needs to be able to get hot. It needs to be able to be handled even when it's hot. So it needs a handle. It needs a way to alert somebody when the water's boiling, right? And so you end up with like, these are the exact forces put upon something to fulfill the criteria of what is needed by that tool.
And I think that it might be important to sort of create a separation here, that's more of talking about, like you said, the experience of a tool,
yes,
not the experience of game design.
Right. This is
there's a big difference there.
This has been my criticism of people using Christopher Alexander philosophy for game design, is because games, I don't really see them as tools.
Right.
They're experiences, but this bracket system is a tool.
You're trying to create something that is more accessible, easier for people to pick up and understand what the actual function is. Whereas a game, a lot of the times, there's a bit more of a hurdle, and you're trying to almost, I don't want to say like an imperfect sort of a thing, but you're creating a very specific experience, right? Not just trying to create an easy experience.
Yeah, exactly. And so here, the most important factor is understanding the forces that are being put upon this tool. Like, what do the players actually need? It does feel like the game changers list side of this, it has entered the sort of community vocabulary a bit. That I feel like has broken through.
I think so.
The brackets themselves, I'm a little less sure of. But this idea of, and this is, I guess, what...
Actually, I feel the other way. And again, this is my own personal experience. I feel like brackets have been more so in conversation than game changers.
What I'm suspect of is that, are players using the entirety of the bracket system, or are they just happy that there's now a list of cards that they can point to say, I knew that card was strong, now it's on a list, and objectively that means it's strong?
In my opinion, I think what the commander really needs is it needs a better guidance or guidelines to be able to evaluate power and what is and isn't actually strong. Because but
that's hard though. That's hard though. Once you start restricting that, the game changers list, I think, is actually perfect. The concept. So I shouldn't. Okay. The cards in the list aren't perfect. There could be more. There could be less. But the concept of game changers is perfect in my opinion. It is far enough to weigh out power, but it is not far enough to restrict people. Right? It is not. It is still accepting of the fact that cards can be powerful, but not powerful enough to be on this list. It is accepting of the fact that cards can be unbanned into this list and be continuously watched. Because if y'all remember from the original Game Changers article, when we had this system brought upon us, the idea was that when cards are unbanned, they are put on this list and they are watched. And if a card was to be banned, it would be on the Game Changers list, unless we had a Nadu contingency where something just came out in the format and immediately need to be taken care of, banned, or stopped because of its play patterns or whatever combos, whatever it might be. And so it's important that we understand how the tool is being used to guide these games, right? Like, what does it mean when you sit down at a casual table, when you have a conversation around game changers versus having conversation around brackets? And I think the brackets are also good because it simplifies the power 10 scale down to be vague enough to match the vagueness of other people. Now no one can say, is my deck a 5, 6, 7? Is it bracket 3 or not? And it's very clear if it's bracket 3. It's very clear. It's either bracket 3 or it's not. If it's more than that, it's a bracket 4, and bracket 4 is a wide chasm. And then you need to have this conversation around, I'm like low bracket 4. Like I got bracket 4 decks. I have one bracket 4 deck that's low bracket 4. That's what I would consider. It doesn't have Mox Opal and all that stuff. Like, it doesn't have the fast mana to the point where it's like borderline CDH high bracket 4, but it's low bracket 4 to the point where, like, yeah, I am playing a bunch of game changers in it because this is how I wanted to build the deck. And so that's what I like about the criteria of this. And alongside the game changers, you also have to understand that Wizards of the Coast, I've said this in so many videos, Wizards of the Coast outlining these details provides so much more merit than people give it credit for. The fact that Wizards of the Coast now rules over the commander ban list, makes these changes, gives people so much, like, it gives so much more weight on that decision for the average player, because people like authority. They like having someone tell them something like this. It's a human condition thing, right? And so having a sense of authority, having a reference, having a rules document or something to be able to reference this off an official body is very important for people. Whereas the conversation before for a lot of people was like, oh, we can play anything, we can play everything, we have a commander committee, like it's just like the one commander, it's the one format that isn't managed by Wizards of the Coast. But now Wizards doing this is so important. I think, especially for me and for people that I've had conversations with at the LGS, content creators, whatever, they feel that it has so much more weight coming from Wizards of the Coast.
Now, there isn't necessarily anything to point towards, and even CEDH, I think, complicates that a lot, because CEDH has so many of these weird, obscure, like, play patterns and lines of play that I think it's even tough for people to see, like, okay, is that actually that strong because it's in a CEDH deck, or is it strong because of the combination of cards within that?
For those of you that don't think CEDH is complicated, that it's just a bunch of blue decks and you just have a bunch of counter spells and fast mana and play Thassa's Oracle, like, go look at the Magdanomicon. Go look at a Magda deck primer. Magda, the mono red dwarf deck. That is a combo engine. That is a tutor package. Look up that deck. It is wild what people have come up with. The amount of resources and gameplay and patterns and cards and micro decisions you make when you're adding and removing a card. There are so many ways that deck can work. And it is the one CEDH deck I have. Because I really I thought it was simple. I was almost going to replace it, but then once I was learning it, I thought it was really cool that a Magic deck can be taken to this extreme. So look that up if you think
how it responds.
And honestly, I think the biggest tipping point between casual and CEDH is that it's combat damage. I think generally speaking, players in casual think that winning through combat damage is fair, right? You're playing fair Magic. Where we start to move into CEDH, you basically almost never win with combat damage. It happens sometimes, but usually your goal is I want to beat all of my opponents at once, and I don't care what their life total is because I'm just assembling an I win the game button.
If you win with combat damage, it's combat damage to everybody in one totality, right?
So I do wonder about the complexity of this system and if there's a way to...
Just to further that, in CEDH, it's not like in EDH, a common play pattern is that you swing out against two players or even one player, and you're so far ahead that one player or those two people that you swung out into were the only ones that were able to stop you, and the last one or two people left. Now you're like, yeah, I'll pass. Can you do anything? And honestly, a lot of the time, those players can't. A lot of time, that last player, those last two players cannot do anything to stop you. They cannot combine to stop you when you win the game. But in CEDH, you cannot do that. You should not do that, because a lot of times, if you do not win all at once, that last player now gains an extra turn, an extra card, an extra untap of fresh mana to be able to use up and try and win the game from there. That is how a lot of decks are built. So you cannot do that in CEDH, or you should not do that in CEDH. It's not a great idea. If you try and win, you should win in totality, because now you've shown your hand, you've used up all your resources. You probably used up all your resources, used up a bunch of cards. And so that's why a lot of time wins in CEDH are just straight up, I win the game. Right? Like on the spot, I have infinite mana, infinite damage, or I have a card that comes down like Thassa's Oracle that says I win the game if I meet a condition. It's not that, like, CEDH at the top level, from my experience, goes less through the loop of you lose the game and more so I win the game. And sometimes the you lose the game, there's a big difference. There's a big difference between you lose the game and versus I win the game. Because the you lose the game makes it so I am affecting you. I have to do something to you individually. 3 people, I have to do something to get them to lose the game. Whereas the I win the game says I have to do a sequence of things just to affect one player, myself, to win the game. Right? And I might protect myself in certain ways. And so there's different ways that you can go about that. And so that's kind of an like a further statement of where regular Commander and CEDH kind of divides. Even in that game that I was talking about earlier with the Kozilek coming in for 10, like that was a game won through combat damage. I didn't ultimately win, but there was a slicer coming in with double strike that ultimately ended up assisting in winning the game. It happened. And so combat damage is more important that way. And it happened one by one. We eliminated the AC player, and then the rest of us were left. I got eliminated. And then finally the Zangief player beat the other kind of partner commander player.
Streamline this, because the more simple this is, right, you need to understand the forces that the players want. Like, what are the players wants? What are they actually looking for here? And then how do you satisfy just that? And I think that this is already ballooned to be something that's larger.
And I think it's tough because I think that it's another common sort of design. I don't know if a paradox is the right word, but you want to know what the players want, but the players don't know what they want, right? They say what they want, and really you kind of have to read between the lines a little bit. And
there was also a comment about the explicit versus the implicit rules of the bracket system. And Gavin Verhey tried to make it really clear that the implicit is what should be guiding these brackets. The implicit being the rules that are sort of implied. It's not defined through the mechanics or the systems. It's defined by the community and shouldn't substitute rule 0, but it should be a sort of guiding light for each of these brackets. And he pointed to the fact that in the initial announcements of the system, it was flipped in that the explicit rules guided a lot of people's opinions of the system. But I think what this is more indicative of is I would listen to the players on this, because to me, what I'm seeing is a community that picked up the explicit rules and went, we want more of this. Yeah. Now, maybe we're a little biased because that's the side that we're on, but the stuff that I was seeing by and large was that players want to be able to just sit down and play the game. They don't want to have to try to navigate a complex, convoluted system where all kinds of different things mean different things to different people. There's a little wiggle room there in terms of like, okay, is this a game changer? Is this banned? Can I play this? Can I play that? Yeah, sure, whatever. But by and large, I think the goal should be as simply as possible to get players to be able to sit down and have meaningful games against each other where expectations are relatively known, right?
And I think, again, as I mentioned, the vagueness, honestly, the vagueness of this system, the openness and like how there's quote unquote gaps that a lot of people complain about, like I think that genuinely helps people do this easier. The rules are less rigid because you don't have, is your deck a bracket 3? No, it's a bracket 2. No, it's not a precon. Oh, it's upgraded, it's bracket 4. Great. Not like, oh, I think I'm a 6. What do you mean? Are you playing infinite combos? Oh wait, that's Grixis. Are you oh wait, you're playing Nekus? That's wheels though. That's not a 6. That's at least a 7, right? You just have this random bracket 4. It doesn't matter. Is that a bracket 3 commander? Is that a bracket 4 commander? And that is where the vast majority of players are. They're in those two. Right. And then you have sub conversations if you want of like, oh, mine's like a low bracket 3, like it's a pre-con. I've added some amount of game changers. I just started playing it. And that's a valuable conversation. And so, again, the vagueness is what I think helps this.
And then you play the game.
The explicit rules are what's stated, but they said, well, don't play like that. Play like this. Like, players aren't going to go off of that because there's no specific structure to it, right? These are Magic players. Like, of course, they're going to be going off of the explicit rules. My concerns is that trying to have the focus be primarily on the implicit rules versus the explicit rules means that there's actually going to be even more division with Commander players than there were previously. But now, on top of that, it's trying to also say, well, this is also a power level system and also a fun meter, apparently. And that when you start getting to 4, there's less fun play patterns. And it's like, that doesn't make sense, right? Like, no one would design a game saying like the higher...
See, that's subjective. That's less fun play patterns is subjective. That is... Like, those are the people that, again, like if you're playing bracket 4 and at your LGS, at your local pod, whatever it is, you are coming across more mass land destruction and you think that's unfun. Well, the mass land destruction player is having fun. So that's fine. In a vacuum, they're having fun. And the other players that may actually frequent the LGS more and know that there's a lot of mass land destruction may play cards that prevent that, play cards that give your permanent hexproof more ways to give it indestructible, or more ways to not be targeted, more ways to recur these lands, play multiple lands out of your graveyard, whatever it might be. And so they have ways around stuff like this, and they may play more mana rock, so they don't care about the lands and they can get them back. And so you may just not be used to something like that. And it's really about understanding that because you're in bracket 4, you open yourself up to a whole new world of pain. A whole new world of pain, and you have to be okay with that.
Level, it becomes less fun.
Yeah, I think there's also the question of governance philosophy. Is this curation, or is this a tool for players to decide what kind of experience they want to have? Right now, there's a little bit of both going on, and I do wonder how much of sort of the committee's input is swaying that idea. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's indicative of the player base at large. But for me, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, how do we make sure that people want to use this thing? And that's to keep it as simple as possible, right? Honestly, I can see a world where there's not really brackets anymore, but it's like you're playing no game changers, you're playing some amount of game changers, or you're playing any of the game changers.
Oh man, you just described the bracket system.
And that's just, you let the players then decide on any of the other implicit rules with like a rule 0.
But this is the thing, right? Like, and okay, you know what? This is going to be a bit of a broad statement, so take it as you will. But in a world where education is taking a nosedive. All these right-wing grifters are talking about we need to move away from college, but the rich elites are still sending their kids to Harvard. Maybe thinking about that. Maybe you should be going to school. And the Department of Education is being defunded in some major powers in the world. I think people need guidance. People need guidance. They do not know what to do when given the choice to do anything. All right. When a lot of people, not the majority, not whatever, a significant portion of the population does not know what to do when given the ability to do anything. And that applies to the Magic community. And so you should give these people open reign, because they should be able to take the rules and tools that you have provided to curate the games themselves. But you do need to herd them a little bit, right? At the end of the day, people are like, oh, don't be a sheep. Get out of the matrix. Just grow up a little bit. I don't know. Like, just someone pooped in your cornflakes and you need to relax a little bit, okay? You do need to be curated a little bit. You do need to be pointed in the right direction, so that you can be doing that. That's the whole idea of metagames and looking at what the pros are doing. You're listening to other people do it. Why not listen to Wizards of the Coast? Okay. Like, at the end of the day, you need a little bit of direction, but you also need to be able to, with that direction, like, yeah, like, you know, don't take the right path, but go to the left path. And the left path is still an open field. The right is an open field, but maybe we're just trying to be curated into the left here, where this field just has, the grass is a little bit greener. There's a little bit more variety. Whereas the one on the right here, the grass is just one tone. There's less variety. So we get curated. We go into this field. We're like, oh, okay, we can have good experiences. We can have bad experiences. It's kind of nice. We can choose where we want to go. And the choice is important.
By saying like, oh, well, we're going to play no game changers and we're also going to play fun theme decks or whatever, right? You don't need this sort of exhibition bracket. Like, let players decide whether or not they want to do that.
Especially because the things that divide brackets 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 are primarily implicit rules, right? Yeah. I think that maybe there's like a slight explicit difference between 1 and 2, maybe.
It's just that.
No, it is more explicit though. Like, in my mind, it is more explicit. You know what? Well, okay, hold on. Okay. Updated bracket image. I remember this actually, oh my god, not the, oh my god. I swear like Rachel Weeks had like an updated, oh, there's my thumbnail. I swear, because this is just the original one. Not my thumbnail. This is Commander brackets, core exhibition, upgraded, optimized CDH. Yeah, I mean, in my mind, it's just that this is the average pre-con, right? I just think of bracket 2 as like bracket 5. That's the way I think about it. Bracket 2 is like bracket 5. It's a very specific thing. Bracket 5 is CDH. That's intent. Bracket 2 is pretty much just a pre-con. It's pretty much just pre-cons. Bracket 1 is low power intent. Like, you ground up build something that is at a bracket 2 or even lower. You ground up build something with intent. And then upgraded is just kind of this wide chasm of 3 game changers. Optimized is this wide chasm of not just a few game changers, but everything. But CDH is an intent to play towards a meta. Whereas optimized is just play the best cards that you want to play without the consideration of a metagame. CDH is play the cards that you have to play in consideration with the metagame. That's, I don't know. That's how I think about it. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know in the comment section down below, but let's go.
Theme thing is that exhibition should be around some kind of theme.
Right. And it's like, I'm sure there's themed decks that are cracked and can win very quickly. So,
well, and that was another thing that Gavin Verhey brought up, is he was basically saying, hey, if you're following the explicit rules and only following the explicit rules, then you're being a bad actor. Okay, well, what if I don't understand the implicit rules? I don't understand that like someone else is going to feel like I stomped them when my intent was not to stomp them, and yet now I'm being, singled out as being the bad actor in that situation. Again, assume ignorance before malice, right? This is the pub stomp problem, right? Is that you're basically saying, oh, I lost, therefore that person's a pub stomper. Like, oh, that person's not following the implicit rules that they may not understand, they're a bad actor, right? I'm like, well, okay, we're now creating a bad dynamic.
My personal belief of what the most important thing is for Commander players to have is better ability to evaluate power level. And I I think a big reason for that is because when I go and look at any sort of Commander content, it is all over the place. There's so many people that think so many different cards are super strong and super powerful. Even like really prominent content creators that have been playing this game for years and years and years are looking at certain cards, and it seems like there's this like inability to understand like, how is that strong? It's strong at your table, or it's strong in this bracket maybe, but like it's not actually that good or that strong of a card individually. And I think a big problem with that is because there hasn't been this sort of explicit guidepost for players to be able to point to and understand like, this is the dividing line between what makes something strong versus not strong.
Yeah. Right. And I think the Game Changers list is doing a decent job.
I think the Game Changers list at the very least is a good system to facilitate that, even if it hasn't been perfect.
Take this outside of this game. Shout out to all my Marvel Rivals players. We're a bit of a point in the community where, for those of you that playing hero shooters, is a big thing with this streamer Necros, who make comments about support players and Marvel Rivals and everything. And there's, I think you can break it down to a situation where dive is really good right now at like the vast majority of the player base, the vast majority of the player base. If, for example, in this game, you have Spider-Man, and Spider-Man has insane movement, insane. Of course, matches with the hero, you can just zip through vast majority of the map and just move at such crazy speeds. And then you jump on the support player and you like almost one-shot them, right? Just pretty much instantaneously. And support players, quote unquote, can't do anything about it. And in that situation, for those levels, right? So again, like this could be in comparison to lower power pods where people maybe play less interaction. The less interaction can be attributed to less skill in Marvel Rivals, where you do have abilities like Luna Snow has the freeze and Mantis has sleep, which notably the sleep is actually easier to hit than the freeze on Luna Snow, but Luna Snow is a better character because of the amount of heals that they output. So there's a kind of give and take there. But in the higher levels, Spider-Man's actually not that good because people can aim. People actually want to win the game, so they'll turn around, they'll look at the Spider-Man player, they can aim really well with their damage abilities and knock the Spider-Man player out. So it's actually a lot harder for the Spider-Man player to get value on a lot of maps. And so with that in mind, that kind of matches up with, you know, bracket 4 players. They will play more interaction, they'll play more cards, or they will play more cards that work alongside these game changers. They know that the minute they play this game changer, they're going to be looked at. So they want to try and play it with immediate value or some type of deal in mind with another player to make sure, you know, it doesn't get all the ire of the table. And so this is where that discrepancy is. So in Marvel Rivals, you don't have that guideline. You just have a wide open system in ranking, telling people good or bad. But in Magic, you can control it a bit more by creating a bracket system, creating game changers so that it's harder for people to abuse things like this if we follow the systems of the game.
Yet. I think that that's fine. And I think it as a half measure for banning is also just a nice design tool for them to have.
Yeah. And well, it's explicitly stating these are powerful cards. And I do think that players yearn for that. They want something. They could have a feeling of like, well, I think this card is very strong. And then suddenly it's on the Game Changers list and they go, oh, I was right. Yeah, that card is strong. Right? You have an explicit way that some third party has confirmed a feeling that you had.
For future of the bracket system, what are you hoping for?
I just want it to be more simple. I think it's way too complicated. I think that the implicit rules are kind of ridiculous, and you're putting a knowledge burden on players that probably will have a hard time interpreting what any of that means. Ideally, it would only be explicit rules in terms of like, I think the easiest way to do that is no game changers, some game changers, any game changers. That's the easiest thing to do.
I think I'm okay with them including small things like mass land destruction. I just don't like the vagueness of it, right? Yeah. There needs to be very, very specific of what does that mean? What does it mean to not chain into infinite turns or infinite combos or whatever? Right. And right now it's still too vague. If you enjoyed listening to us talk about the bracket system update, please feel free to give us a little like and a subscribe, maybe a comment down below.
I'll hit you with the comment down below. Let me give my closing thoughts here. Channel is growing almost to 20k subscribers. That's great. I think what is going to be my comment here? I think highlighting intent as you folks did is important. I believe the vagueness of the bracket system is the key to having it succeed, and I think it does a good job in simplifying the previous Power 10 system we had, which helps the casual audience. All right, perfect. Simplifying. Okay. All right, there you go. Leave a like on the video. Leave a comment. I'm gonna like my own comment. Shout out, you know, I'm gonna like a couple more. Just help the algorithm. Just a lot of comments getting likes. Just help the algorithm. All right, there you go. But I think at the end of the day, I think the bracket system is working. I think there are ways that it could work better, but I think it actually is doing what it needs to do. I think it needs more time to bake in. And just like the Powers 10 system has had years on it, the bracket system over time will uptake very well, in my opinion, for people. It just needs time.